Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you, and you're back. I guess with some of you have got smiles on your face at least, so you had a pretty good week. Corey, I know he had fun. He's quarantined and locked up for a few days. But anyways, it's good to be back, and it is our Tuesday, March 9th, our Senate Ag Committee meeting. And this morning, the first item we have on the agenda is S67. And that's a bill that Chris has introduced, Chris Pearson, in regards to the right to repair agricultural equipment. And I don't know, Chris, if you'd like to lead off with a little part to tell us why you introduced it and what it does generally. And I see you have Dave Hall, the drafting person, with you.
Yeah, and
So
Linda,
if you'd like to get started, that'd be fine.
thank you, Mr. Chair. And Linda, I see Nathan Proctor is in the waiting room. I don't know if we could let him in just so he can hear. He's a national expert on this. I don't pretend to be expert in this one at all, but the basic premise is after I buy something, it should be up to me how I deal with it, including if I want to take it apart and try to fix it, or bring it to my uncle to try to fix it, or bring it to my neighborhood repair guy or woman to try to fix it. And the bottom line is, between clamping down on accessibility of parts, on making electronic diagnostics, things like that, very hard to access. The John Deeres of the world, and this applies, in your, frankly, it applies in your kitchen, on your laptop, it applies everywhere. But what we're talking about today is just ag equipment. The manufacturers, even though you could own something outright, have a lot of power over how you can fix it, who can fix it for you, and your options. And that is costly. It costs us time. It is tricky in our rural state, especially because you don't have a John Deere authorized dealer around every corner. And it just frustrates me. And we will hear from the industry, if we dig into it, all the horrors of how unsafe this is. And oh my God, I mean, when we looked at this a few years ago, the premise was, you can't fix your coffee maker because one day soon your coffee maker will be connected to the internet, and then therefore whoever fixes it will get into your bank account. I mean, just to give you a flavor of how absurd it is. It's really absurd. And the way I like to think of it, and I'll stop here, is we can fix our own cars. We can take our cars to the corner garage or to the dealer. We have that choice. And nobody is going to tell me that you're more at risk for safety by, doing your own brake job or the emissions work or whatever. I mean, your car is a pretty significant piece of machinery that could hurt a lot of people, could hurt you. And we are peaceful about that, because the market dictates, if your garage on the corner is no good at this stuff, the market will take care of that. The neighborhood will take care of that. And so when we hear from the industry, I just would ask you to keep that in mind, because really, when outside of the automotive world, what the industry will repeatedly basically say is, you can only take your car to get fixed at the dealer. And that is not a truth that we've accepted. In fact, people have passed laws about it. There have been referendums about it. It's overwhelmingly popular among voters that we have some freedom. And what we're trying to do here, and I hope we'll be able to hear from farmers and others, is give people that flexibility who have the skills to fix their own equipment or to take it to their neighborhood repair, to give them some of that power, make it easy for them to get real parts, maybe the diagnostics, et cetera. So that's what we're trying to do. It's a fascinating issue, cuts a lot across all sorts of political lines, and I appreciate us taking a little time to dig in.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Did you want to go to the bill now and have Dave run through that for us?
Sure. We also have Nathan Proctor, who is one of the experts.
Can you guys hear me? I don't
Yes.
know.
Yeah.
Something's froze again.
We've actually consistently heard you, Mr. Chair. Sometimes
Oh,
your video
okay.
freezes up like that. So the question for committee and for you, Mr. Chair, we have Nathan Proctor who can dig in a little bit about the policy. And I don't know if you want him to go first, and then we'll have the line by line from David Hall or vice versa. I leave that to you, but he's here. I've worked with him a little bit, and we were on an FCC panel number of years ago. He's very knowledgeable, so I'm glad he can take some time to be with us.
Well, I just as soon, as long as Dave's got some time, I just as soon, as long as we're talking in general terms, it would be good to hear from Nathan first, and then he can leave if he'd like, and we can move into Dave Hall. Dave, can you be with us for a bit?
Yes.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Dave. Well, welcome, Nathan. It's good to have you with us this morning, and you can, I guess, give us a little insight nationally on how this issue is working out. I know we talked a little bit beforehand, and as the farms seem like as they get larger, there's usually a son or a daughter that doesn't really care that much about the animals, but they do get into the machinery end of it and try to keep that all running, and could see where this would certainly help in those cases. But give us your perspective, Nathan.
Well, yes, thank you, Chair. I'm so glad to be here. I do have some slides because I was going to take about 5 minutes, but there's some it's easier to show some of the tools that we're looking to access and maybe explain a little bit about why there's a problem in the world. But yes, thank you for that introduction. Let me just start sharing because I have share a screen.
Yeah, and we have until after 11, Nathan. So I think we have plenty of time.
Okay, great. I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions because, I feel like that's the best way to learn stuff, at least for me. So this is actually a picture from the FTC event that Senator Pearson was at down in DC. I'm enumerating 3 things. So I'm the Right to Repair campaign director for US PIRG, which is a national nonprofit with, I work to basically support all the state campaigns that are around the country on this issue, which includes, VPIRG's campaign based here in Boston. Let me just kind of overview. I think Senator Pearson framed this really well, which is like, what is this bill about? And it's about trying to prevent repair monopolies from taking place. Every equipment manufacturer of any kind has a incentive to restrict access to the care and management of that product because they can capture the repair service revenue without competition. Those costs, those margins can go up and up and up, and also they can control the life of the product. And both of these, all these factors are true for agricultural equipment. And I want to start with just, in order to fix something, you need access to just some basic stuff, right? You need to actually have the skills. You need the information, usually found in a manual. You need the tools. Sometimes those are wrenches, but increasingly those tools involve, computer tools now, and you need spare parts. And the solution that we kind of put forward in this bill is really to get access to manuals, tools, which includes these advanced software tools, which are defined in the bill as both diagnostic tools and then embedded software, which I can talk about specifically about ag equipment in a second, and then spare parts. And really, this on ag equipment, the big hurdle is all about tools and embedded software. And an example you can have here is, Walter Schweitzer, who's a farmer in this picture. Walter had something go wrong in his tractor, and it just started like an alarm started going off, and then his tractor would shut down. Then he would turn it off and he would restart it, and it wouldn't happen. But it was happening so often that he couldn't finish haying his fields. And, he called, none of his local mechanics had access to the tools to diagnose the problem or to clear the error codes. And the dealer, because it was haying season, everybody had their equipment out in the fields, and it was very, very busy. And it took 32 days for the dealer to fix the problem. And it cost him $5,000. Now, the part that was broken was just a broken fuel sensor. And it would have been about $500 parts and labor to get that fixed. But it was impossible to diagnose the problem without John Deere's diagnostic tool. And it was impossible to install a new fuel filter without their basically software installation tool. And that's why these are the problems we're solving with our bill. Right now, instead of inventing technology that's moving farming forward, right? Farmers are doing a massive run on old equipment because it brings their costs down, because all the features that are being added in this new equipment are just making life more difficult for them and making it more expensive to raise food in this country, which seems like, why would they be doing that? And the answer is, because they can control the product better and it's better for their shareholders. So this, like Senator Pearson said, we've made a lot of progress on automobiles. So in 2012, we had a voter referendum in Massachusetts. It passed 86-14, which, in case you were wondering, much higher percentage of Massachusetts voters than actually own cars. Meanwhile, the Farm Bureau and the Farmers Union nationally, with help from other groups, won an exemption from federal copyright law, basically to hack farm equipment in the course of repair that is now officially legal. And in 2014, this referendum in Massachusetts became a national MOU between the automakers and the aftermarket auto repair businesses, and then road commercial vehicles were added. So basically, if you have like a dump truck or a large piece of commercial road equipment, everything that you were looking for in this bill, you can get, but you can't get it for your off-road equipment. And there's just like a disconnect for mechanics because this equipment is functionally the same. It's a big diesel engine, it's all heavy equipment. It's all, stuff that has the same safety or, environmental controls. It's just, you can get it for some and you can't get these tools for others. The manufacturers in 2018 agreed to make these increased access to tools available by deadline of January 2021. And the problem is that is really not working out. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about role of software lock. So this is the readout of a modern piece of equipment. You can see it's highly computerized. What you need to do to install a spare part, assuming that the part is connected to the computer network in the tractor, of which is increasingly likely, is probably about half the repairs you can do on a tractor are just mechanical, but increasingly it's like there's very, on the most modern equipment, there's very little that you can do on that equipment without having access to these tools. A modern combine, the newer combines, we found have like more than 125 different sensors, and replacing any one of those sensors, like Walter had his fuel sensor go out, any one of those sensors requires access to tools that you cannot get. And that's that screenshot in the upper right-hand corner. That's John Deere Service Advisor. What that program does is it installs what in John Deere's language they call a payload file, and what we would call embedded software or firmware. That's what it's called, across different industries. And basically it's like a printer driver. So you put in a fuel filter, and then just like in your, Windows computer, you get the installation wizard, and it searches the internet. It finds the correct printer driver. It installs it, a little like, progress bar goes across. It installs it, and that allows the computer to talk to the peripheral printer and to be calibrated. And so that, when you print, it's not just, 142 pages of gobbledygook. I don't know if you've ever done that with a printer, if you don't install it correctly. And that's what this program does. This installs payload files to make sure that the computer and the part that you just installed are on the same page, that they're working correctly. And occasionally you need to also run a separate process, which in John Deere parlance is called the calibration, which is essentially pairing the two computers, the computer and the part, so that their serial numbers are matching in a way that it knows that part is an official part that is approved by John Deere. That is all this equipment is made to do. This equipment is not made to, like, there's no drop-down menu here that says, hey, install totally random files on your, components, like play Minecraft on your, screen here. No, all this tool does is allow you to get the official manufacturer approved drivers, or else called firmware, to allow parts to operate. That's all it does. It does nothing else. And any suggestion that having access to this tool would allow you to install an illegal piece of software, it's just not true. And I've asked this directly to John Deere engineers, and it's not true. Like, there are tools that allow you to install other software on your tractor, but you essentially have to jailbreak your tractor in order for that to happen. You need to buy black market software, and you need to replace all the John Deere original software with black market software. It's just like jailbreaking any device. If you're familiar with that term, you have to replace, like if I want to jailbreak my iPhone, I have to replace the Apple operating system with a competing operating system, which is made by somebody who's not Apple. Is very dangerous to do that as a consumer, because anyone who would make this black market version of the phone OS probably is also stealing from me. So the fact that farmers are being forced to, in some cases, in order to like harvest the field, to buy this black market software, I think is very dangerous for farmers. I think that we should be doing everything we can to prevent that from happening, because I don't know who's making this illegal software for them, and I don't know what their intent is, but it's not safe. We should be using John Deere's authorized protected tools as much as we can.
And do
Sorry, go
they,
ahead.
do they have this law passed somewheres in the United States, where some states they can buy this software? Or
Well, the way it works now is you can get everything, all the similar things, but for the road vehicles, right? In fact, I just had another lawmaker telling me that he manages the municipal fleet in his county, and they have dump trucks,
Yeah.
and they're the same engines, and they actually call the firmware in those equipment payload files. And he once a year they buy the updated payload file packages from Chevy. And one time they actually didn't have the right file, and they had to take it to the Chevy dealer to get it installed. And it was $75, which to me is shocking. But this is like the power of the free market, right? When the only choice is the dealer, they can charge whatever they want. And so you're paying $1,200 to install a printer driver, which is essentially how it works. But now, because on the automotive side and the commercial vehicle side, because there's an open market, the dealers don't even charge that much, because they know that people can go somewhere else. So it keeps them honest. And I honestly think that, I don't think that the dealerships in Vermont will suffer much under this bill, because the good dealerships will keep all their business, because people who like their dealers and feel like they're getting good level of service will just keep using them. And they have advantages in terms of they have more training, or they have more brand recognition, or they actually sold the equipment. But the problem is when there's no option, things start to go kooky, and you have farmers who are spending $12,000 to fix relatively minor things. I had one farmer reach out to me saying he spent $1,400 to fix a turn signal, which is why I have that picture of a turn signal there. And it was just because he didn't have the payload files or the ability to install them. And so John Deere said they were going to give us all we needed. We wouldn't need Right to Repair. This is what happened in 2018. And, you know, I can kind of stop screen sharing here. So I've kind of gone off this, but, and the truth is they didn't provide the ability to calibrate parts or install updated payload files. And so, and it's very, very expensive. So you might pay $10,000 to get access to this tool, and then still some percentage, 25% of the repairs you would need to do, you can't do. So you can imagine how frustrating it would be to spend $200,000 on a piece of equipment, then spend $10,000 on this repair software so that you wouldn't get, you know, your equipment stuck in the field that you couldn't fix, and then only to have, you know, something go wrong with it and to be like, well, no, you can't fix that. That's one of the things that you're not allowed to fix. I think that the only solution from here is to win reforms in the force of law that protect farmers' choice in repair, and that force the manufacturers to come to the table and actually figure out what we can do to let people fix their stuff. And I just don't see, they've been dragging us for such a long time on this issue, and they really haven't. It's really clear that they're not going to give us what we need unless we pass a bill.
Yeah. I know. I don't, am I froze again?
No,
No.
Brian?
thank you, Mr. Chair. So Nathan, that was a good presentation. I do have, I think, a question that you haven't, well, you've touched on it. And I'm much more familiar, I should be honest, with Harley Davidson motorcycles, and I know our chair is as well. What has happened in the years since I bought my first one back in 1978 is there has been an uptick of independent sort of people that can work on them. And there's also been a huge expansion of the aftermarket product category. But what you're seemingly indicating here is that what you're after is for someone independent to be able to use John Deere products to fix their equipment. See, in the motorcycle world, you can go on right now, I bet you, and Senator Stark can tell me how far off I am. I bet you there are at least 12 or 15 exhaust manufacturers, handlebar manufacturers, air cleaner manufacturers. You don't have to have a certified Harley Davidson part in order to put that on your bike if you want to customize it. And there's plenty of people, we have two in Rutland, independent guys that understand it. Both were Harley trained mechanics, but they don't work for Harley anymore. There's only, I think, two, maybe one dealership left in the state. And that's in Barrie. And then I'm on the western part, so I can go to Glens Falls, New York, to if I wanted to see the other guy. And I will be honest, for some major stuff, I'm a little bit more comfortable going to the dealer, but I could change my own oil and put plugs in and all that kind of stuff without resorting to using parts. So how big is the aftermarket product in the agricultural world?
That's a great question. And, you know, so the idea of being able to install aftermarket parts is something that, you know, we've gotten very used to, in especially, you know, people like to customize, you know, their motorcycles, and, you know, and it used to be that way with cars. Like, the problem is that anything that's part of the controller area network system in a tractor requires a handshake process with the engine control unit or the computer brain, and a big tractor will have 15 such systems in it. Like, and so there's no aftermarket for any of those parts because copyright protects the software which talks between the part and the computer. And so there's a huge incentive for companies to then put software in everything and then restrict access to, you know, because then the only place you can possibly go is the dealer, and you know, the other thing that this bill has is a fair and reasonable pricing standard for OEM parts, which prevents basically price gouging. If, like, you know, you need a fuel filter, you know, they can't charge you $700 if it's really like $40. So that's another piece that actually they don't have in the automotive world. They don't have a fair and reasonable pricing standard for parts, and so this has become a problem with cars in the car
Yeah,
repair.
Chris?
So Nathan, just to make sure I'm understanding sort of the connection of your answer and Senator Collimore's question. In the Harley universe, we do have more of a right to repair, correct, currently, right? So is it fair to use the example if Senator Collimore replaces his oil filter or a muffler or something, he can do that on the Harley, and he could do that on a tractor. But on the tractor, you also have to put in a piece, you have to nudge the computer to say, hey, you like this new oil filter, computer, feel free to run. So if I draw the parallel out, and correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Collimore could fix it on his tractor, but then he'd have to take the tractor to the dealer, and the dealer would have to make the computer talk to it so that it will actually function. Whereas his Harley is off and running once he's put the filter in there. Is that basically what
It's
we're talking
mostly
about?
right. And then one clarification is, one, there's obviously a lot of repairs that don't involve, you know, installing a new computerized part. And so really the farmers who they're going along, they're replacing their tires, they're, you know, changing their oil filters or whatever. This is not, the companies could easily, you know, put a computer chip in there so that you couldn't change the oil, but they haven't done that yet. And then they run into some problem, like even the turn signal. This one guy said a turn signal. And the headlights now in like BMWs are like so locked in with software, you really can't even change your headlight bulbs outside the dealership anymore. You know, and you know, and again, they don't have a fair and reasonable pricing standard. So an independent could change your headlight, but they have to pay like BMW like $14,000 or something like that. So, and then getting back to the other piece, like Harleys are actually some of the more modern motorcycles. Some of these rules don't apply to them. So some of the more modern motorcycles, people are having a huge problem with because you can't get the software for them. But like the old, especially like the classic Harleys, I mean, they have a lot less computer stuff. It's really the way that software can lock you out, and there's no remedy unless you like pirate the software, which is illegal. So this is where the problem has kind of crept in, is around the software.
That's a good point,
The
Nathan. I made
Go
it my
ahead,
business
Brian.
to buy 2001 Harley, because it was the last year that they manufactured without fuel injection. And if you waited till the next year, then you couldn't change your exhaust system without going back and monkeying with the fuel injection and making sure everything lined up. I mean, I go back to when it was points and plugs, and you could just open your ignition and change your own points and plugs. You didn't have to screw around with a whole bunch of other stuff. So I'm very sympathetic to this, and I think most Vermonters that I know, especially most Vermont farmers, would rather fix their own darn machinery.
Well, the big issue is, you know, like the guy that lost the 30 days. Well, a motorbike, if you lose 30 days, well, so be it. You know, you just can't ride it. But that farmer, his crops are sitting out there in the field waiting to get harvested. And sometimes they could even go by and make his crops worth nothing. And so, I mean, they've got a lot to lose if that equipment isn't running. And that's why they have it in the first place, is so they can do their cropping in a timely manner. So,
Yeah, and then
No,
almost all the breakdowns happen in peak seasons, and
yeah,
there's a
well,
huge bottlenecking problems at the dealership.
yeah, they don't break if you don't use them. You know, when they're sitting in the storage shed waiting for the next crop to come along, they don't break there. They break when you're using them. I know our big trucks that I run, or my son does now, but that same thing with them. They never break when they're in the shop. It's it on the weekends. It's when they're out on the road if they're gonna break. So any other questions for Nathan? You got something else, Nathan, you wanna offer at this time, or you wanna we'll hear from Dave on the bill?
Maybe I could just ask Nathan to give us a little setting. You know, I think I first introduced something like this bill 4 years ago, maybe. And we turned it into a task force, learned a lot, including that the industry, you know, won't sit idly by if we monkey here. They enjoy the profit center. But the worldwide discussion on this issue has absolutely taken off in that period, including in Europe and Canada. So Nathan, just give us some context for where our little discussion here, if we were in person, we'd be in the tiniest legislative room you've ever seen in the country, I promise you. In our little room here, where does this conversation fit in terms of the dialogue that's happening around the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm pretty sure that European farmers can get exactly what this bill is asking for. And in fact, we called all the ag equipment dealers in Vermont and asked them if we could have tools that would allow us to install payload files, et cetera. I think there were 5 John Deere dealers and then 1 Claas dealer. And the Claas is a company out of Europe. And that was the only dealer who said, yep, you know, we can get that. You just let us know the equipment model number or whatever, and we'll send it to you or whatever. And so, yeah, this is a thing. One, there's like, it's shocking to me. Like, so about a week ago, the EU right to repair rules on major appliances took effect. And so if you buy an appliance in the EU now, you're required to be able to fix it for 10 years. So they need to make all the parts service information available for 10 years, which actually goes a little bit farther than our bill would, because we don't require the stocking of parts for a certain number of time. The Australian productivity, like the FTC of Australia is doing an investigation. The FTC here did an investigation. This is an issue which is, Canada's having its own agriculture right to repair conversation. This is an issue which is kind of bubbling up from the bottom. And what we saw with cars was one state makes a declaration. Meanwhile, I mean, this bill is in 25 states. Basically half the country is talking about this right now. One state passes a bill, then another state. In the meantime, basically the industry works something out to, as a way to move forward. And there's no version of this as not happening. I don't think consumers are ever going to be just accept that they don't really own the property that they own, especially for a farmer who spent a couple $100,000 on this equipment. They're not going to say, "Oh, I give up. You can maintain ownership of it, manufacturer. I'll just hope the thing doesn't break down during harvest." It's not going to work. This is going to happen eventually, and the more places it happens, the stronger the protections will be, the more honest response we'll get from industry. And I'm hoping to move on to other campaigns in my life too, but I just don't see how this is going to go away. I mean, if you guys don't work on this year, it's going to come back next year. It's going to keep being an issue until somebody has the courage to stand up and do something that protects people.
I was looking at some John Deere equipment while we were off this past week. Those combines are $325,000. I mean, they're a lot of money, and of course they don't run 24/7. They only run during harvesting and things, and so that's an expensive piece if it breaks down when you're trying to do your work.
But let me just add this, because this is really important to understand the economics of this. John Deere has been selling less equipment every year and is making higher and higher profit margins and more money.
Hmm.
And that's because their profit margins for service are 6 times higher than for the sale of new equipment. So this is a massive profit center, and I think it makes the equipment kind of inflatedly technological, including things that don't really help the farmer, because they're kind of subsidizing the cost of the equipment with this basically monopoly on the service market. And it's doing, I think it's just creating like perverse incentives, and I think we need to fix that. So
Brian, you had a question?
I did, Mr. Chair, maybe more of a comment too. I'm not necessarily speaking out against the manufacturers being able to recoup some profit from the back
No.
end of the house, so to speak. I mean, I think that is important that they do that. But I'm also a big believer in the market and the competition engendered. If there's more than one person doing a job, it kind of is a check and balance on, let's say, inappropriate or really extreme kind of levels of profit too. And especially since in the end, they're still going to be able to sell the parts. From what you're saying, there aren't any aftermarket parts in many cases, like there are with cars or motorcycles. So I think overall this does make some sense.
Chris?
I just can't resist. I still remember moving appliances, helping my grandfather move appliances like the washing machine, and in the back would be a little envelope, right? Do you remember this? And that was the schematics. You didn't have to pay extra for the schematic. It came when you bought the product, right? This is how far we've moved. And I'll just say, in years past, when I filed this same idea, but for everything, not limited only to ag equipment, invariably I had all sorts of industry people reaching out to me, and they may not understand the Vermont process. So once you file the bill, of course, in our process, Nathan, you don't own it as the sponsor anymore. But they would email me, oh, you really, we see you did this. You really should remove laptops because there's so much sensitive. And it was the same story every time. You really should. You don't understand. It's different for tractors. And the one that came across to me, and I would just say, was medical equipment. And they said, Pearson, aren't you cute? You've filed this bill, but you really maybe should exempt medical equipment. The stakes are so high. And I'm thinking to myself,
yeah,
maybe that does make sense. You don't want to have something go wrong with the robotics that's doing surgery on you. The next day, I got a letter from UVM MedTechs, the repair folks at the hospital, on letterhead. Sarah Pearson, thank you. We would love to be able to fix our stuff. We waste all this time and money waiting for the authorized person to come in. We could do it ourselves and save money. And it was just stunning. It was absolutely stunning. These people have the training, and they don't have the corporate seal of approval, and it prevents them from doing it. And UVM quickly undid that letter. It no longer had letterhead somehow. And it was a week later, but it was an amazing story, and it really opened my eyes that we don't have to be any more afraid of any of these issues than we do in the pickup truck rolling down the street is a serious piece of equipment. There are big stakes, and we shouldn't let untrained people deal with them, but the owner has that call. It's their responsibility. Anyway, thank you for the time. I appreciate it, Nathan. Keep up the good work, and hopefully we can add to your campaign here in Vermont.
After reading this morning's news, maybe you ought to call UVM up and ask them if they've been spending a lot on repairs lately because they're millions of dollars short.
There's actually a huge problem with ventilator repair in the pandemic.
What was it, 25 million? They're in the hole. But they don't worry about that. I mean, well, are we all set? You can stay on if you want, Nathan. We're going to hear from Dave and Chris, so we'll run through the different sections of the bill. So Dave, are you ready to roll?
Yes, sir, I am. Good morning.
Morning.
Good to see you all virtually. I'm David Hall, Legislative Counsel, one of your attorneys. You guys all know me. I don't see any new members on this committee. That's good. I staff Commerce and Economic Development. Sometimes that crosses over into agriculture. I have been working on different versions of right to repair bills with Senator Pearson for a number of years, including having staffed the Right to Repair Summer Study Committee, which dealt with other issues, mostly to personal electronics, consumer devices, and stuff like that. This bill is, as your discussion in your committee indicates, is specific to agricultural equipment. And it's a 9-page bill. I think rather than read the thing word for word, which will bog us down tremendously, if you'd like, I'd like to share my screen, pull the language up, and focus on the 3 sort of fundamental requirements the bill imposes. Is that okay?
Sure, that'd be fine, Dave.
Okay. So you should all, I hope, be seeing S67. Yes?
Yeah.
Great. I'm gonna expand you on my second screen so I can still see you all, and I have the document up as well. So as I said, I'm gonna pop ahead because we want to get right to the meat of it. There are a lot of definitions which are important, but at this point, more or less self-explanatory. I think what you really want to know is what would this bill do? And
that would be the most helpful part.
sure. So, you know, this basically imposes requirements on what is referred to as an original equipment manufacturer. I guess maybe I should disclose for the record, as the chair knows, my family has a dairy farm in Williston and lots of agricultural equipment that sometimes requires repair, but I don't have any direct financial interest in any of that. Just an aside. So this would apply to agricultural equipment, and the duties go to the original equipment manufacturer. And I turn into page 7 here, subsection A. So we're talking about electronics enabled agricultural equipment. So you can use your imagination. This applies to tractors and harvesters and combines and all kinds of things that, and the accessories that go with that equipment. If they are electronics enabled, right? So there's some sort of computer system that makes this thing work. So for that equipment and for the parts of that equipment that are sold or used in this state, this OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, shall make available for purposes of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair of the equipment. So to any independent repair provider or to the owner of the equipment that the OEM is.
Dave,
Sorry?
why do we have solely used in this state if that's
Sure.
that's in there? Why do we have solely used here? If you were a farm on the Connecticut River, you might own land across the river and harvest, go over there to harvest your crops. Does that limit the use or this bill if it breaks out of state?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's really important to underscore here the scope of, what a state can do. And under our police powers, we have the constitutional authority to regulate transactions that occur in this state, activities that occur in this state. We cannot try to export our laws to be applicable in other jurisdictions. That's a Commerce Clause violation. So to the extent there are cross-border, transactions, and of course there are. We're really talking about regulating transactions that occur here, not in New York, not in Massachusetts, not in New Hampshire.
But you
Otherwise, we
couldn't,
run into problems.
you
Bobby-
couldn't get away with ownership of, owned by a resident of the state of Vermont?
I'd have to think about it, but remember that we're talking about the sales and the transactions that happen in the state, which is really the limit of our jurisdiction.
But I think the chair thought that it said solely used, but the language says sold or used in this state. I don't know if that is part of the question you're asking, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, well, I want to make sure that we can go as far as we can with this and not leave somebody out. But if it's written like you just said, Chris, we should be okay, I would think.
Yeah, I apologize if I slurred my words. Page 7, line 2. This applies to equipment that is sold or used in this state.
So I have a question about that. If somebody bought a combine in New Hampshire, but came across into Vermont and used it, would it fall under this piece of legislation or not?
Yes,
It would.
yes.
So in that case, we're going to go after a New Hampshire.
No, the duty here is flowing between the manufacturer and to people in this state. So the duty is, if you built the equipment, you have a duty to either an independent repair provider in this state or to an owner who has the equipment they bought in this state. It's okay if you bought it somewhere else, but if you're a Vermont farmer, you're the owner of that equipment in Vermont, then the duty flows from the OEM to you as a Vermont farmer.
Understood. Thank you, David.
Sure. I apologize if I,
David, maybe you could hit the little slider at the bottom of your screen and make the bill just a little bigger for us.
that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
See that better?
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
that's much better.
Sorry. My second screen is actually my old TV. So at this point, the words are the size of my head. It's like hurts my eyes. This is a home work from home hack. So let me turn back here to the duty, because who it applies to is super important. The OEM, the manufacturer, has to provide either to an independent repair provider. So that means you're not, a John Deere authorized dealer. You have your own shop or whatever. You don't have this official relationship with any particular manufacturer, or to the owner of the equipment. All right. You have the duty to provide, you'll see line 6 here, on fair and reasonable terms, the documentation, parts, and tools, including any updates, to those two parties, to the independent repair providers or to the owner. You'll see in line 8, nothing in the subsection requires an OEM to make available a part if the part is no longer available to the OEM. So you heard earlier that there's this 10-year window on the EU's repair requirements, and that basically means that in part they have to keep stuff in stock for that period of time. This would not necessarily do that. That's not the purpose here. So A is manufacturer, make available on fair and reasonable terms the parts, the information, the software codes, all that stuff that you need to repair. Make that stuff available to independents, make it available to owners. Under B here, for equipment that contains an electronic security lock or other security related function, the OEM shall make available, again, to the owner or to the independent repair provider on fair and reasonable terms, any special documentation, tools, parts needed to disable the lock or function and to reset it when disabled in the course of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. You can make that stuff, the documentation, tools, parts, by means of some appropriate secure system so that it's limited in its scope to what you need to do to repair. Under C, the third duty applying to the OEM, if they have made an express warranty with respect to electronics enabled equipment, and the equipment's more than $100, the manufacturer shall provide parts, tools, and documentation to repair the equipment during the warranty period at an equitable price and convenience of delivery and of enabling functionality in light of its actual cost to do this under 1, 2, the ability of owners and independents to afford the parts, tools, and documentations, and the means by which the parts, tools, or documentation distributed. So C basically says, if you've got warranty coverage, you've made that available, that's out in the universe, then you have to basically enable independents and owners to do that warranty work during the warranty period and make the stuff available, considering whatever your costs are for making that available to independents and to owners. So to recap, the duty that Vermont would be imposing on equipment manufacturers is to make information and parts and tools available to independent repair providers and to owners to fix their own equipment. I don't know how much more detail you want to get into. There are obviously more details in the definitions. What do we mean by documentation? What do we mean by embedded software? The enforcement mechanism is through the Consumer Protection Act and the AG's office. If you fail to comply with this, you could be subject to enforcement through the CPA. But that's really it. That's the scope of the duty and the parties to whom it applies.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So David, maybe it's not obvious. My question is, there's a lot of subjective terms here. Fair and reasonable, equitable, something that's affordable. Is that part of okay, I see it, the answer's already coming.
Well, so fair and reasonable terms is defined, and there are a few subparts to it, depending on what we're talking about specifically, whether it's a part or a tool or other thing. So there's lots of words that yes, go to define what we mean by fair and reasonable. The majority of this bill is definitions. It's about 6 or 7 of the 9 pages.
Thank you.
And is the burden, is it going to be on the manufacturers, so not on the dealers? Did I see that or hear that?
That's correct.
So why would our dealers get all hung up on this if this is a service that their manufacturers got to offer to their customers? You'd think they would be happy with that.
Well, the dealers are right now the beneficiary because they're the only place you can take your tractor to get it fixed. So I think that's what we'll hear. That's what we've heard in other states. So the question is, when they were monkeying with this similar concept in Massachusetts, I'm sure the auto dealers had the same complaint, and yet they're still in business even while they authorize independent repair. So,
It froze up again.
It keeps coming back to that same principle of should we spread it around? I think we should, or do we want to keep it in the hands of the dealerships?
Well, yeah, I don't know, but like the big trucks, they're all like these farm tractors. Well, if you can diagnose your problem at home, every time we buy a new truck, it's in that deal that if that sucker goes down, they've got to supply us with a truck to take its place. And I mean, I don't know why farmers don't, dicker like that, but if we can find out at home what's wrong with it, 90% of the time, we take it to the dealer anyways and have them do that update or repair or whatever it needs. But the finding of the problem is a real bummer if you can't get any assistance.
Well, let me just say, and Nathan can back me up on this. The reason the things that are on the road have better permissions around this whole concept is because of Massachusetts. Massachusetts, it's one of those examples where Massachusetts passed it by referendum. As I understand the history, the legislature then took their sweet time sort of figuring out the details, and you might imagine how that would go. They didn't deal it. The people put it back on the ballot. They voted it again. And the industry, all of the manufacturers, this was at a time around 2011, I think, when I would take my Subaru to the dealer or to the garage on the corner, that guy had to have a computer for Subarus, and he had to have one for Hyundai, and he had to have one for Honda, and he had to have one for Toyota, and it was ridiculous. And so none of them had any of them, or maybe they had one or two based on what vehicles were in the neighborhood. After the Massachusetts law, all of the manufacturers, all of them, came together because one state, and they formed an MOU. And as of 2018, every one of our vehicles has a common computer system for this diagnostics. Every one, because of one state's law. And they did it because one state was brave enough to take them on, and it effectively changed the industry across the entire country, maybe more broadly. And so the parallel is really, really powerful here and important, and why I don't let this go, because even if we were to be the only brave state, and a lot of other states are looking at this, we do have the potential to impact far beyond our borders. And exactly what you're saying, that the farmers are not being savvy about the contract when they buy a combine. They do not have that option. When you guys buy a big rig, you have the option because of Massachusetts leading on this issue, I believe.
Yeah. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to be fair to everybody, I'd like, if we're going to pursue this, which I think we are, I'd like to hear, I'm trying to recall the guy's name. His last name's Carpenter. He owns Champlain Valley.
Brian Carpenter.
Yeah. So I think it's important that we hear from our local businesses too, our dealers like Champlain Valley. And, he could probably shed some light on how this would affect him and that kind of thing.
Well, and the John Deere guy, that was sold here just a few years ago. But they own 4 or 5 dealerships, the John Deere outfit. So we should have them in, and we'll have whoever's selling this equipment here in Vermont, we'll certainly, give them plenty of time to come and deal with us, Tell us what's bad about it.
Chris, I know you've been working on this, because I do remember when you introduced it before. Was there something specific to farming or agriculture that made you peel off the rest of it and put it on for this session?
I like you guys.
Okay.
I mean, there's 2 things. First of all, the principles apply across the board, so there's nothing special about it that way. But I do think it's intriguing because of this sort of visual of, we know a lot of farms do their own repairs or would like to do more. We know that unlike, your laptop or something, the tractor breaks down in the middle of a field, right? It's not convenient to just throw it in the back of your truck. So there's to me, something intriguing about it. And across the country, there's been increased focus on ag equipment as just as a strategy, I suppose. Maybe a little easier to to look at those because they're so similar to road vehicles. And so it was a combination of those factors, Brian, that just had me digging in here.
Okay, thank you.
Corey?
I just would echo what Senator Collmore said. I'm fairly supportive of the concept here. I just want to make sure, we have an opportunity to hear both sides of the argument and just have them point out any rocks we might not be seeing. But, I think engage them under that principle that we should move this forward, but how do we do it in a way that works for everybody as best as possible?
Well, I didn't hear a word you said, Corey.
It was
sounded
profound,
good.
Bobby.
I don't know what the heck's going on with my hookup today, but it'll cut out on me for some crazy reason.
Basically, what he said was I was right.
Well,
I'd
of
like to
course,
listen
he's
to-
gonna,
I'd like to get a few
Yes.
farmers in too who've had this experience. I think
Yeah.
that's important too, to highlight this. And so it's not a PERG versus dealership issue, hearing from our actual constituents, I think will resonate for all of us.
yeah, if you know of any, any farmers, and we can have Linda post this on our webpage, they may look at that and see that we're dealing with this and welcome them to the, to our next showing or whatever. So are there other questions at this point in time from any of the members or Nathan or Dave? Do you guys have anything else to?
Well, as your attorney, I hate to always have to raise the specter of potential issues, but I don't want you to be surprised to hear, if you take further testimony, if you have me back, that, I think there are some constitutional risks here. One that comes up more in the context of the personal electronic equipment was a dormant commerce clause risk, because so much of the repair was done outside of the state. There was at least an argument that could have been made that we would be trying to favor in-state economic interests at the expense of out-of-state interests. I think that's less of a concern here, because repairs would, do happen here. For instance, you can only, for certain laptops, you can only have them repaired by mailing them back to the manufacturer out of state. They do their own in-house repairs, and the argument would have gone, we're trying to redirect business to in-state independent repair providers, and that will come at the expense of the out-of-state manufacturer repairers. So I think that is a much lessened, if zeroed out, concern in this context, given the nature of the equipment involved. So if anybody's following along at home for the history of right to repair, let me check that one off the list. Two more concerning areas, and I can't tell you the scope of the risk because I don't know, but the trajectory of the regulation of free speech in the last 20 years has been such that data, information, and even like commercial transactions to an extent are much more increasingly viewed by our Supreme Court as speech. And for instance, in the IMS v. Sorrell case, part of the reason that the state lost that case was that data and information was construed to be protected speech. And when we tried to regulate that, we violated the First Amendment. I think the parallel argument here is that we would be forcing manufacturers to provide data and information to speak more than they otherwise would absent this regulation. And that is not speech that they would want to make, because they don't want to give away information, data, literally words from manuals or whatever else, to people that they wouldn't want to otherwise give them to. And I think that that's at least a colorable challenge to a law like this. And then the last one is more of a due process / takings concern I might have here. I mean, there are very real economic costs to forcing manufacturers to give away their repair information. The costs will come,
Trigger.
at least theoretically, to the manufacturers themselves, to the authorized dealers who have these economic relationships set up with the manufacturers and benefit from their position. And they will undoubtedly be damaged if more, either independents or owners are able to do their own repairs rather than go to these authorized dealers. So in that respect, they have investment-backed expectations in these relationships they've set up with the OEMs. And to the extent the state is damaging those relationships, there's at least an argument, and I'm not giving you, I can't handicap how strong it is, but there's at least the argument that we are taking valuable economic interests away from people with investment-backed expectations. I'm not. let me wrap all that up to say, a number of things. As a state, we have police powers to regulate the public health, safety, and welfare to the extent we want, and only limited by the federal Constitution. Those three places where there may be constitutional concerns are the ones that at best I see. I don't know that they're a super big problem, but it's my job to flag them for you, and that they should be part of the discussion.
Yeah, Dave, the only thing that I would argue against you on is I would hire a better lawyer than the one they had before. Chris?
Just to say, I have been reaching out to TJ's office. They're aware of this bill and promised to dig into it. Whenever I do that, I always want stuff in a few days, and they always need several months, which is good. They're taking it seriously. So just to say, we have been working with the Attorney General to see if we could get their take on some of these issues that David has raised in the past. So, we're not totally oblivious to these concerns. Obviously, these are powerful corporate interests that, we're pushing on their business model. So.
Anything else, guys? If not, thank you, Nathan, a lot for being with us for as long as you've been able to stay. That's great. And thank you, Dave, for your presentation. I guess we'll close our hearing in regards to this bill, the introduction of it is S67, and we'll move on to S83. Anthony?
I got to go down the hall to Senate Natural Resources about the chicken bill.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then Chris will be joining me down there in a little while. So anyway, I'll be back. I don't think it should take too long.
What time have you got to be there? Right away, Anthony?
Yeah, 11:15.
Oh, that's why. Yeah, Michael has to be down there at 11:15 as well.
Right.
Then what we're going to do, Anthony and Chris, is that all transpired yesterday, kind of in the afternoon. Michael, he was scheduled to be here and run through the bill along with Senator Ingalls. He said that they'd asked him to be there, and I said, well, we're going to get that freaking bill passed. If we're going to get it rolling this year, we got to go when we're invited to be there. So I told Michael to go ahead and present that along with you guys. And I figured we would visit with Russ and he could run through his bill and give us kind of an overview, but officially yeah, we'll get Michael back in the next trip. He can be with us and go through that, more formally. So
Sure.
that's fine. Try to get them to vote that out if you can.
I'll do my best. So
Yeah.
I'll probably be back. See you later.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
And I think
So, good
Senator Polina and I will just tag team because I'm supposed to be there too, because we're both reporting.
Yeah,
So
no, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, to work it out of there if you possibly can. Because their part never got changed a bit as far as I could see. So anyways, welcome Russ to the Ag Committee.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the
Yeah.
invite. I appreciate it very much. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. And we do have copies of S-83, the bill that you put in. And I know you been working with Michael O'Grady on it. And so you want to give us a little overview of how you happen to put it together and little facts and figures, just something general and.
Yep. If I
Yeah.
could, Chair, if I could read a short statement, would that be okay?
Any way you want to do it.
Thank you. Well, first I want to thank the Senate Ag Committee for hearing S-83 and possibly taking it up. I'd like to see something to help these farmers to end the 50-year war that seems to be going on with them since the 70s. We all understand the importance the dairy business is to the state of Vermont. This is hardly, there is hardly an advertisement touting our state that doesn't include an old dairy barn, a silo, a cow, or another farm animal, a stone wall, or a fence, or a freshly baled hayfield with little kids jumping off the bales, or a standing field of corn, or last but not least, an old farmer in overalls. When at one time Vermont had over 35,000 farms, we're now at a precarious low number of between 600 and 700 farms, depending on what we're considering as farms, and that's dropping every year. And why are these numbers dropping? Is it the cost of labor, or machinery, or fuel, energy, feed, too high of taxes? Certainly, all that contributes some. Is there enough consumption? Well, the answer is that why fluid milk is dropped some. Dairy's actually gone up since 2010 to about 653 pounds a person, based on 2019 figures nationwide. Farmers are simply in this position because they're not being paid a fair price for their milk. The world market has huge forces working against dairy that seek to drive the price of milk down to the cheapest price point possible, not worrying whether or not farmers stay in business. This presenter does acknowledge that is something that we cannot control, but what we can control is how much we sell dairy for in our state. What S-83 seeks to do is to charge 5 cents for every dairy package that is delivered to a retailer of dairy products. The 5 cents is collected at the wholesale level and is designed not to ring at the register. That money collected will then be dispersed to the Vermont farms that are registered with the state based on the per hundred weight of what they produced, just like they are paid now. While there are many moving parts to this bill that still need to be figured out, this senator has no proprietary or territorial obligations to change to any of it, as long as it does the overall standing of what we asked it to do, and that is to support our farmers and pay them for their milk. S-83 is the start in the right direction of doing what its sole purpose is to do that for. I have asked anyone who would listen to me this past year a simple question. If you knew that farmers would be the direct benefactor, would you pay more for dairy? Every person asked has emphatically said yes. I haven't found anybody to say no. We must help our Vermont farmers before the picture of that old dairy farmer in his overalls is just that, a picture of a memory. And that's the gist of where I got. And the formula that I've used on this was the formula that probably one of the highest taxed products that we have in our state, which is gasoline, all those taxes, the consumer isn't aware that they're paying those, what they're even paying for taxes at the pumps. It's collected at the wholesale level. When 10,000 gallons of fuel is delivered to the service station, well, that check gets written and all the taxes are paid, and the state collects their money. And that was something I was hoping to do here. I wasn't in favor of calling it a tax, but Michael had said that the only way that it would ever withstand any challenges is for it to be a tax and for that money to be deposited into the general fund.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different peoples about how we can how this money can be dispersed. I actually had a great conversation with DFA, with Kirsten and Jennifer, and they were concerned about this dairy compact and about creating a whole nother layer of complexity as far as to pay people to administer this money. And it sounded like they would be interested in finding, maybe finding a way that they could actually disperse the money, because they already dispersed the money already. But again, Senator Starr, there's a lot of complexity to this bill, and I'm just trying to get it started down the path of trying to get farmers at a state level to get paid more.
Yep. So the one question I had, Russ, did you have anything else you wanted to offer?
Oh, that's good. No, I just soon have you guys asking questions, and without Michael here, I'm probably a little bit limited, but I know just enough to be dangerous, but I can get us a good start.
Well, we won't ask you any hard ones. We'll save that until Michael comes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
One question I had when I just started reading very early on about the 5 cents per package. And the question I have is, if you go and you buy a half a pint of milk or a pint of milk, are you gonna pay the 5 cents on that? And then when you go buy the gallon of milk, pay 5 cents on that gallon? Or is it gonna be divided up so that on that little purchase you pay less or more on the big purchase? That's one question I had to get us started.
The way the bill is written is exactly as you framed it. It would be on all packages, no matter what the price of it is. And the reason we did that is because when dairy is sold, you don't just the stores don't buy a whole ton of butter. They buy so many units, and so they buy the unit prices of it. And it's not that we can't change that, Senator Starr, to be different, but the way we wrote the bill was on each unit or on each package, as we've called it. So yes, that's the way it was meant to be. It's not that we can't work that and change it proportionately to charge more for a higher price.
And Corey?
Yeah, so my question is probably more of a question for you, Bobby. I have no issues trying to figure out ways to get more money into our dairy farmers' pockets, considering I represent the largest dairy county in New England. But my concern is when it goes to the general.
Stop your bragging. You aren't that big.
My question is when money goes to the general fund, and you know this best, how can we protect it? My big worry is we do this, it works for a couple of years, and then another program short funded, and the folks on appropriations have different priorities than we have, and that money gets used on something else.
Yeah, you have to kind of have that set. Michael will tell us all, but you kind of have to have it set up that way to be legitimate, and you build some guardrails around that so that you run it through the treasurer's office, and and it protects the money so that, you know, they won't use it to do our universal meals program with. Right, Chris? You know, we've talked, Russ, quite a bit in the committee. You know, you go buy a gallon of milk and it's $4 and something. But if you go buy a pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream, that's $4 and something. And it takes a hell of a lot less milk to make that pint of ice cream, you know, than the gallon jug. There's a lot of unfairness, or, you know, the system's messed up. And that's why our farmers aren't getting paid from.
And I just don't think, Senator Starr, that we're going to be able to fight Unilever. We're not going to be able to fight the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. We're not going to be able to fight these large entities who just want to keep their thumbs down and keep those prices suppressed so that those people can make more profit. And I think that this really has to be an effort that is consumer driven within the state. If they knew, I mean, I really would like you folks, just ask the first 10 people you see. I think the consumers in Vermont would get behind that should they understand that this is going right direct payment to farmers. And there's another aspect of this bill that I did not include, only because I really wanted to get the discussion started. I also do believe that if Senate Agriculture Committee takes this up, that we ought to include other products in there who have done the very best job that they can do to diminish what dairy is capable, what dairy does for product, and that's the soy milk. That's all these other products that act like dairy, and they're in our same case, but yet they're not dairy, and they do every day that they can do to damage the reputation of dairy. And I think that they ought to be included as part of that. If they're going to act like dairy, they ought to be part of helping to defray the cost of what we're trying to do. If dairy was invented today, you guys are the committee, but if dairy was invented today, it'd be a superfood. It really would be. I mean, it's the first thing that a baby has is its mother's milk. And I think that the other companies who I'd like to see get involved in paying the 5 cents per packet have done a very good job of diminishing how great of a product dairy is.
Yeah, there isn't 1 ounce of milk in soy, real milk in soy
Right.
milk, but yet they can put milk on their label and on their packaging. Oh, no,
Absolutely.
it's messed up.
Yep.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you, Russ.
You as well, Senator Collmore.
As you might imagine, I had some initial pushback on this because I'm not a fan of introducing any new taxes on Vermonters, and it is a tax. But as we talk about it, I'm slowly warming up to at least the idea of
You're
being,
softening up, Collmore?
well, I'm not 100% there yet, but I like the idea, okay, of giving money to the farmers. I have no problem with that. I'm a little also concerned with introducing another layer of bureaucracy on top of all the other stuff we have. The Agency of Ag is involved, the tax department's going to be involved. And I just wonder how much of that nickel.
That trigger. See, my thing shut right off for some reason.
Bobby, you're still on. I'd mute.
We got you.
I don't think he realizes we just heard that. Okay, now he's frozen anyway. How much of that nickel is actually going to go in the pocket of Mr. Farmer?
That is the complexity of where I'm at as well. And that's when I talked to DFA. I initially wanted to, as I was penning this bill out and trying to get it out there, to make it kind of mandatory that the people who are already paying the farmers would administer this these dollars. Because they've already have the structure. They already have, they don't have to charge any more to do this because they already have the people in place to do it. And when talking with DFA, now I didn't get a commitment from them, but they were nodding their head in the right direction. They seem to be that they would be in favor of helping out with that, and that would be the way that I would like to see it go. Again, you know, I had to do with what Michael had said to keep us in compliance as far as within the law of the land. And if Michael was here, he could he could help us out a little bit more. But again, I don't have any. I want as much of that 5 cents to go back to the farmer as we can, and any way that could be scrubbed to make sure that it's there, I'm fine with that, especially if it's the overall plan of just putting that money in the farmer's pocket.
Yeah, okay.
Well, the other thing I don't think you've done, if you have, tell us, you haven't figured out what this could raise either, have you?
Well, the Joint Fiscal Office has gotten back to me and they admitted that they are just, it's purely an estimate. They just have really struggled as far as to where this would be. And I mean, they're just dancing all over the place. And if, in fairness to them, it's just a hard thing to figure it out. But they've come up with just an initial, very conservative estimate. They've come up with a $4.4 million per year, an estimate on it, which isn't enough. We know that's not enough. But I think that as if this committee's to look for, and again, they have said that this is really just as a shot in the dark, but again,
shut right off again.
Yeah, but I think, but I do think that we really need to consider.
I don't. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Because I can't.
Yeah. I do think that as moving forward, as far as to the folks in the committee that can hear me, that we really need to look at broadening the revenue of that, and not necessarily charging the real dairy. I'm sorry, Senator Starr. But I do think that we need to figure out these people that act like dairy to get them to contribute to this program as well. And I think we could probably see some numbers higher that would actually benefit us.
See, as I said earlier, Russ, we've done some work on dairy. We do know that how much milk we produce in Vermont, and we know how much milk is utilized in Vermont, which is up towards 64%. But what we don't know is how much of that 63 or 64% stays here, gets distributed to our stores, or like Ben and Jerry's, Cabot cheese, all those items get loaded on a truck and shipped nationwide. And if we could capture that market, then we would be talking some real dollars. And
we probably have as much coming back into well, I shouldn't say as much, but we probably have a fair share amount of milk from Maine, Massachusetts, and New York coming back into Vermont, being retailed here as well. I do, and you guys probably know this better than I, but I do understand that 60% of our fluid milk heads to the Boston market. And so we're not going to be able to, at this point in time, we're not going to be able to capture any of that money. It'd be nice if we could, but this bill, the way it was written, was certainly intended to every package sold in the state of Vermont, no matter where the milk came from. And that's why I did it at the wholesale level, so we could track that. It's pretty easy to track an invoice when they deliver 5,000 pounds of milk to Price Chopper as unit prices, and it's pretty easy to track that. It's just been hard, as the Joint Fiscal Office has said, it's hard because they never really had a way to track how many units get sold in the stores. So certainly a lot of work left to do here.
Yeah, and I don't know if, the ag department should have some numbers on that. They send inspectors to the store and all that. But we do know that we have Booth Brothers that bottles Hood Milk and Booth Brothers Milk, and then we have Monument Farms. But we also know that all the school lunch milk has to come in from out of state
Exactly.
and, delivered to the schools because nobody wants to package those little half pint deals. And, we've got work ahead of us, I think, but, it shines a little bit of light on the issue and that at least we're thinking about trying to help.
Bobby, at the very least, I'd love to tax soy milk and give that to the dairy farm.
Oh,
Absolutely. I mean,
oh,
I
no,
think,
don't
I think we
worry,
should.
We'll tack that trash on.
yeah. I mean, if they're riding on the coat backs of farmers, or especially our Vermont farmers, they should be part of that tax. They really should be.
And that artificial cheese that comes in, I think
Yeah.
Kraft makes.
Yeah.
Brian, you had a question?
Yeah, I just kind of, I'm wondering, I think I know the answer, Russ, but I'm sure Michael, it's the Interstate Commerce Clause, I think, that would prevent us from charging down into Massachusetts and other states, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, what would prevent us from going to Ben and Jerry's directly and getting a nickel from them while it's still in Vermont before it's retailed out of state? I mean, that would be up to them to figure out their own procedure for recouping that, I guess, right?
That's a great idea. And that's something I didn't think about, but no, absolutely, positively. And, and I'm thinking that you're not going to get as big a pushback as what, you get some of these companies that are, they say they're all about the farmers. And you hope that they're all about the farmers. And that's certainly something that we can remind them of. And there's another aspect of it as well, is that we would allow these companies to advertise on the package. 5 cents of every part of this package is paid directly back to a Vermont farmer. And so they're getting some benefit out of there as well. The only way this is going to work, senators, in my estimation, is if we get buy-in from the public. If the public is in favor of this, which so far, again, I challenge you, go ask the folks that you see, the first 10 that you see, if we get buy-in from the public, this thing is going to sail and it's going to go well. And I wish that we didn't have to call it a tax, but a tax is a tax is a tax. It's what it is. And the reason why we have to is because what Michael says, otherwise it's just not legal. But I like that idea, Senator Collmore. I like that a lot. And I don't know why we couldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference to me. If a quart of ice cream already costs, what, $4.25 or something north of that, and you're adding a nickel, I don't think, I mean, again, you're talking to somebody that's just philosophically opposed to increasing taxes, but it's a negligible impact at that level. Whereas if you have a little teeny thing of yogurt and you're adding a nickel, that really does say, whoa, that price went way up, didn't it?
Right. But you look at, and with your same idea of what you put forth, if you look at what Cabot does, or you look at what Hood does, you look at all these other producers and they're sending those products all around the world, of our Vermont milk. And if they are truly there to help the farmer, and we allow them to advertise on that packet that they are, that would probably get us to some substantial dollars that would actually do what we want it to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate your efforts. I really do.
Did you get to talk to anyone at Cabot or at Commonwealth Yogurt or any of those manufacturers?
I did. DFA was the biggest one that I did, and I think they represent almost 10,000 farmers across the country. And you know how it is. I mean, everybody's nice, and everybody nods their head yes, and everybody smiles, and that's the way that it is, and that's what we do as well. So we kind of know that. But it's and I've talked to a lot of the trade unions, people asking questions, and so far, again, a lot more discussions need to be happened. But so far, the people who are in the dairy industry seem to be favorable to the position, or at least to start the discussion. So the answer to the question, Senator Starr, I haven't talked directly to Cabot. I've talked to a lot of the lobbyists, and they all seem that this is a discussion that they're willing to have and would like to see it move forward.
See, like on cheese, we know, from past history that like Vermont cheese, Vermont milk, they can make 11 pounds of cheese out of 100 pounds of milk. And so you take those little packages that most of us buy at the local store, and they weigh a few ounces, I don't know, 3 or 4
Yep.
ounces or whatever. You can pretty much figure out what, they sell for $3.50.
Yeah.
And you can figure out how much money Cabot's getting and how much that nickel will cost on each. Well, it's going to be a nickel on each one of them little packages, but you can figure it out on what it's going to cost per 100 weight of milk. And the ice cream is a little more tricky because they make a mix that they make the ice cream out of, and who knows how much mix how much milk goes into the mix to make how many pints of ice cream. And so there's, I would believe that 4.4 million short.
I would believe it would be too, Senator Starr. It's the best that we could do with what the Joint Fiscal Office could come up with. But I would definitely believe that was short, especially if we could go with Senator Colombine's recommendation of going and trying to get those packages before they leave the state. You go to Florida and you go to every store in Florida, there's Vermont dairy product down there, just like there is in all 50 states and a lot of different countries. If we could get them to buy in, the real thing is we got to get buy-in from the public on this. That's what I think that's what will make. I think that's what will make it work.
Now, did you figure that the money would get divided amongst each farm on an equal basis, or divided with each farm on a percentage of the milk that they produced against the whole?
Yes, I did it. Initially wrote the bill that they would get paid the same way that they get paid on their product now, per 100 weight. And there would be a formula that they would use. The monies would be we'd figure out how much money we collected, how much milk was produced in the state, and then pay them just like DFA pays their farmers, or Cabot pays their farmers, or Agrimart pays their farmers, paid on that percentage weight per 100 weight of milk. But again, if this is in your committee and you folks take this up the way that it's best seen, it's what you guys do. You guys do this every day. I don't have any territorial or proprietorship of any ideas that you come up with, as long as it just benefits what the farmers pay them for the milk. That's all we ask.
Yeah. Because see, if you did it by the farm, there's roughly 600, give or take. Some days we're under 6 and some days a hair over. But if you did 600 at $7,000 each, I think if you multiplied that out, it would come to $4.some million. And 7,000 isn't anything to sneeze at.
No, it
especially
isn't.
For our small guys, that would really make a difference for them.
But can you
think.
imagine what it would do if we could include those other fake products that are acting like dairy, and we got this number right, and we got that number to 28 million? or we got it
Oh,
to 30
hell,
million.
yeah.
I mean, can you imagine what it would do? I mean, the goal with the state, the minute that I introduced this bill, Secretary Anson Tebbets asked to meet with me, and I met with him the next day, and they seemed pretty warm to the idea as well. But if we could get this so that these farmers, when instead of seeing $12 a hundred milk, their low point would be 18, which is still too low for them to survive, but it's a lot better than 11 or $12 a hundred. I mean, if we could use this as a mechanism so that even during the lowest price of milk, they're not down that 11, 12 range, where we know that
Yeah.
they're just hanging on for dear life. What a difference it would make. And then maybe, possibly, we could see these some more 80 cow farms come into play, some 50 cow farms, some 80 cow farms. You don't have to go very far up into Canada to see some very nice operations up there.
Yeah.
And another point that was made to me as well, when I was talking to, I've talked to everybody about this, is that how beautiful of a state Vermont is. And a lot of that can be attributed to the dairy farmer. And I'll tell you why. Go into those areas in New Hampshire that used to be strong dairy, and you drive down the road and you don't see anything. The trees are all growing up. You can't see the fields anymore. You can hardly see the mountains. But in Vermont, every view that you see is attributed to a dairy farmer. I mean, you just go up over that hill and then the landscape just opens up before you, and you see just how beautiful maintained it is. And that's pretty important to our tourist industry for people to come and see that.
Yeah, it certainly does look a lot different than New Hampshire and even Maine. You know, you get over there, those farms have all grown up to brush.
You can't see anything.
No, it looks like heck. And
Yep.
and no, we're kind of blessed that, farmers are branching out. The big ones are, hell, they're going 20 miles to crop land and to get land, and it's good that they're keeping that open. Are there other questions that do you have some of us, Russ?
I'm good as long as you folks are. I appreciate you letting me come in and talking about this. I'd love to see if somewhere down the road we can get this moved down the road. But just to have the conversation of it, makes me very proud of what we do as a state, and I appreciate you guys very much.
Well, we'll certainly give a run at it and get the people in that we need to get in to try to get them to hear what they got to say, and nobody's shot at you or anything like that.
No, not yet. I think some of the soy producers are. I don't know what they milk, but I think some of the soy producers they're after me a little bit, but they're not good shots anyways. They're from the city.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was last year, the year before, but in prior years, we tried to get the name milk removed from soy milk.
Yep.
What a heck of it was unreal.
I just like to, go ahead. I'm sorry. Apologize.
There was not 1 ounce of milk in that damn container, and yet we couldn't get the word milk taken off from it.
Well, we'll just tax them for it now. That's all. I'm in favor of that.
Well, I think, I don't know where we'd get it, but maybe from the ag agency, we could get a list of all the products that would drop in under the categories that you have. Because I know they check, dairy products in the stores, unit pricing and all that stuff. So was there anybody in particular over there that we should have in from the ag agency, or?
Yes, and I don't have that list in front of me, and I apologize. I was just looking for that, but when I met with the ag agency, it was everybody, all hands on deck were there. I'll send you who was in that meeting, Senator Starr. I'll send you who was in there, and they certainly, again, everybody smiles and everybody's nice and everybody nods their head yes, but they seem to be in favor of it, and they asked that I kept them abreast of any progress, which I have. But I'll send you an email with the names of the folks that have been in touch with me, and I'll send that right out after this meeting.
Yeah, because we'll see Diane Bosfeld does a lot of.
She was
that.
there. Yep, Diane was there.
Yeah, Abby Willard, she does the promoting and all that stuff, and EB Flurry and milk people. But send that along and then we can get them in. But it's going to be critical to get these, the people they're going to be paying this, the distributors, and hear from them and hear how bad it's going to be for them and going to put them out of business. They aren't going to come to Vermont anymore.
Well, we'll find another to replace them.
Well, maybe we could do a little manufacturing ourselves.
I like that idea. I like that.
Get some jobs going.
Yep.
Anything else, Brian or Corey, for Russ?
No, just thank you for, the conversation going on, getting more money in our farmers' pockets.
No,
Yep.
Thanks to you, folks, for having me, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, we'll stay in touch, Russ, and if you have any questions, feel free to let us know, and we'll keep pounding away and trying to get it figured out. So with that, thanks for your time and
Thank you.
appreciate you coming in, and have a good day.
You as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So guys, tomorrow we've got meetings the rest of the day. But tomorrow we'll be doing S61 the first thing in the morning. That's the current use issue on small properties under, I think it's under 1/10 of an acre with a solar panel on it. They didn't want the tax department said it raising heck with current use, and so they wanted to come in and talk with us in regards to maybe getting that changed a little bit. I sponsored the bill so they could get it printed up. But what I was thinking that we would do with that, if we all agree, is that it's just a short deal. We'd throw it into the miscellaneous bill that's coming over from the other body. We'll figure that out as we move forward. And then over the week, last week, the Maple Grove Company in St. Johnsbury, the ag agency did some testing over there, their products, which they, do off and on. And they said that they had some product that didn't meet met national standards, but didn't meet state standards. And of course, Maple Grove called Jane and Joe right up and want to know what the heck was going on. And so hopefully, as Kristen Haas, that's under her jurisdiction. She'll be in I hope tomorrow, and we can kind of drill down on that issue and find out, why are our standards higher? Or she can't come, but she'll come. Linda just sent me a little note. She'll be Thursday, she'll come. But why are our standards higher? Where did that higher standard come from? When did we do it? How much higher is it than the national? And see if there's some way we can get something, some compromise worked out where it doesn't screw Maple Grove all up, but yet at the same time, it doesn't screw our quality of maple syrup up. So that'll be coming, and I mean, we're in good shape with our bills if we can just get the two, one out of ed and the other one out of natural resources. I think we're fine down in appropriations for Ryan Patch's money. I think we're gonna, add that in, okay. And I don't know, we had something else down there that, I don't know if it was Gus's money or there was something else down there, but we've already talked about it to some extent. And that all looks pretty positive. So unless you guys got something else, I think we're in pretty good shape.